Hello and welcome back. This is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and you're watching Marksman TV. I have a tabletop review of the Franchi Spas 12 gauge shotgun. Usually we do video comparisons. It's one thing I like to do a lot of. There are some shotguns I have in mind that would do great to compare with this. However, this is such a unique and iconic shotgun, especially in pop culture, that I think it warrants its own video. Hopefully maybe in the future I'll get some other shotguns in that we can do some comparisons on with this. But just to start off, let's just do a general review and dedicate this video just to the Spas-12. We'll go ahead and jump into that now. Let's get started. So let's go ahead and jump into the history of the shotgun now. The Spas-12 is an Italian shotgun designed by Franchi and manufactured between 1979 and 2000. The Spas-12 was designed and intended for the use of the military and law enforcement agencies and was considered to be a combat shotgun. Spas originally stood for Special Purpose Automatic Shotgun, but in 1990 it was renamed to Sporting Purpose Automatic Shotgun, so it could see continued sales in the United States after the 1989 import ban by then President Bush Sr. As the name would suggest, this is a dual-mode, semi-automatic to pump-action shotgun with fire modes that could be switched by the user depending on the ammunition that they are running, but more on that later. The post-ban import model did have a fixed stock and limited capacity. It was imported until 1994 until banned under the Clinton assault weapons ban. In 2004, the ban had sunset, but by that time it was too late for future importation of the Spas-12, as Franchi had stopped manufacturing of the shotgun in 2000 to focus on the Spas-15. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the overall specs of this shotgun. It does have an overall unfolded length at 41 inches and a closed length of 31.5 inches. The barrel length is the common 21.5 inches and it weighs right around 10 to 11 pounds. Now, there were different barrel length configurations. They did have a short model, which I believe was 18 to 18.5 inches. Those are very, very uncommon. The most common one you see in virtually all of the imported models of the Spas-12 are in this configuration with the 21.5 inch barrel. Now, speaking of that, there are different varieties and configuration of the Spas-12, which include some that were also manufactured or imported. The story on that is a little bit convoluted, and a lot of it has to do with the stock. So on the overall review of this, I'm going to go ahead, usually I start at the front end. I'm going to start at the back end to kind of get some of this out of the way. So this configuration with the unfolded stock is actually in the US market the most desirable and most rare. This was essentially a pre-1989 import model. So what had happened is these were imported in the country between 1982 and 1989 by FIE. And basically, again, it was imported in this configuration, which was the configuration it was manufactured in for military purposes. Then in 1989, like I said in the history overview, President Bush Sr. Instituted the importation ban on certain weapons and certain characteristics, which this fell under. So after that happened, FIE did suffer very severe losses in sales. And then American Arms Incorporated purchased all the remaining parts and completed shotguns from FIE, and then manufactured them post-1989 in a fixed stock configuration, so at a complete non-adjustable fixed stock. And they did limit the magazine tube up here at the front to be limited to a certain magazine capacity. I can't remember what that was, 4 or 5 rounds, maybe 3. I'll have to look that up and I'll annotate it. The manufacture and importation of the Spas-12 with the fixed stock did continue until 1994 when the assault weapons ban was passed by Clinton. That then hurt the sales drastically of the American Arms Incorporated, and then these were no longer made or manufactured for the civilian market as they couldn't under the importation and restrictions on assault weapons. Then after the sunset of the assault weapons ban under the Clinton administration in 2004, these of course could be manufactured again for the civilian market, at least manufactured here in this configuration, still couldn't be imported. But by that time, Franchi had stopped development and stopped manufacturing of the Spas-12 in favor of the Spas-15, which they were working on at the time. So with that being said, this is sort of a pre-ban, pre-importation ban configuration, and for that reason they are pretty rare. These will sell anywhere from about, in excellent condition, $1,500 to $2,000 plus, which actually means that they basically held their value because that's about what they sold for back when they were sold as brand new. Also, another thing that leads to their popularity is their use in pop culture. We always see the Spas-12 gauge in this configuration with the folding stock. Very popular in movies like Jurassic Park, The Matrix, Terminator, just to name a few. Also, video games. The amount of video games this thing has shown up in is just endless. Some of the Jurassic Park video games, I believe Counter-Strike, Rainbow Six, just to name a few. So, you know, very, very interesting, cool looking, especially with this heat shield shotgun that's used in different video games and movies. So that's another point of note as well, and another reason why they're so desirable by people. Also, variation wise, real quick, this is the Spas-12, of course, which can be fired in semi-automatic or as a pump, and I'll get onto that when we get up here into the function. And then there was the SAS, or the SAS-12, which was pump only, and then there was the LAW-12, LAW-12, which was semi-automatic only. So this here has the best of both worlds. All right, let's go ahead and start back here with the buttstock. Okay, this is probably one of the most iconic things about it. A couple things of note, and just to start off, I'm going to give a huge shout out to Chris over at the Spas-12 project. I believe that's www.spas-12.com. I'll annotate that down at the bottom of the screen. There will also be a link in the description. This was missing one nearly critical part in the buttstock area, which I will show you. Now, one thing about ownership of a Spas-12 is the parts are generally almost impossible to find. Franchi hasn't made these in, gosh, 17, 18 years now, so and they don't really support any production of parts on these, so they are really, really tough to come by parts. And also, when you get a new Spas, there are some things you will probably want to change out, and I will point those out as we go. But long story short, I ordered some of the parts that I needed, you know, for the shootability, a couple buffers and everything from the Spas-12 project, and I just sent a note over with my order just asking, I'm missing a cross pin here, and I'll tell you the relevancy of that. And I didn't really expect to get any type of you know, lead or response, and then I just sent them a note and said, hey, if you happen to have a pin like that or know of a lead on one, please let me know. Owner wrote back, super, super cool guy, said that he actually has a customer who has a source on some, so he's going to work hard to try and get me that pin. I've also read online that really they're enthusiasts before they're a business. I kind of get that feeling working with them so far, that their biggest intention is getting people out shooting Spas-12 shotguns because they're really passionate about it, and they really try to do their best. So, long story short, I think they deserve that shout out. If you get one of these guns, go check them out for those buffers and everything. And also, if you have any questions, they have a very good YouTube channel that deals entirely on this shotgun. They get really into the detail configurations on changing out some of those parts that I'll point out to you in a minute. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and jump into this. So starting off, the butt plate here hinges, and there is a pin that should be right here in this hole. That's the pin I was talking about. It's got a little detent spring on it that locks that in place, so you push on it to unlock it and it can collapse, and then when it gets to here, it meets with another hole. I guess it's an opening here. Actually, yeah, there's the other hole there, and then it'll lock into place to keep it in the open position. So with that gone, it cannot lock. More importantly, these did require a buffer to sit in here. It's like a little round plunger thing. I'll roll in a picture. That pin is also required to hold that buffer in place. Without that buffer, what happens is you can see this can turn a little bit inward. Through recoil, that can push on this and push up against that pad and can, you know, really damage or even crack the buttstock. And these stocks alone are going for $600 to $800 when you can find them. So that's a really important piece to have, and I would not shoot that without that pin there holding that buffer in place, which is why I really need one. And again, thanks to Chris over at the Spas-12 project for trying to help me source that out. This is a stamped metal. Of course, you see these iconic lightning cuts here on the side. Now, with this folded upward, there's a button here that I can press to fold the stock up, and I'll bring this over so the stock, of course, folds up completely over the sight, and then you can, you know, lock it up in this position or just keep it folded down. Now, there are two different stock variants. and one of them will actually have a plunger here which will lock into your rear sight, keeping this collapsed. Not all of the stock configurations have that. This one does not. There is a little hole here, and you can get a buffer to stick in that to kind of create a little bit of a gap space here, which I've also ordered from them. So I'm going to be installing that as well. Of course, to open it up, you just push back here, swing it down, back around, and it locks itself in place. And then you would push that button, which I don't have right now, and then fold that down. If you want to see that done in the Jurassic Park movie, just before he's about to take a shot of a velociraptor in front of him, he opens the stock and then folds that clip down, and then he sees, you know, the raptor off to his right and says the iconic line, "Clever girl." So anyway, that part is really cool. Now you also usually see a hook down here, which this also does not have. It was very common for people to remove those. Those could be removed. The reason they would do that is you had a giant steel half ring which would add weight, and it didn't really serve a huge practical purpose. The reason for that was to be able to rotate it 90 degrees and be able to hook it around your arm here to have it as a support to shoot one-handed. Now the shotgun is about 10 pounds, and I guess if you wanted to shoot one-handed that helps, but I don't know too many scenarios where you would want to shoot the gun one-handed, so it really got in the way more than it helped people, so a lot of people just got rid of it altogether. And because of that, most of the folding stock variants on the market will not have that installed with it. And if you can find them on their own independently, they are about $200. So if you do find one of these with an original one installed, that will add some value. And of course, to know if it's original or not, there will be an L stamped on the heel of the opposite end. That would be sitting right here. So keep that in mind. Moving on up into the receiver, I will go ahead and bring this in. This is one point to kind of to point out. So here the roll markings do say Spas-12-L, and then of course you have Franchi SPA, Brescia, made in Italy. This is interesting because a lot of people will see that -L and think that it adds value to the shotgun. If you're looking at this and somebody says, oh, it's got a -L, it's a law enforcement, L for law enforcement, it's a law enforcement model. It's actually not what that is. The first name of Franchi is Luigi. It's Luigi Franchi. He's the designer, the owner of the manufacturing facility that makes these, so, or that did make them. So the L is actually for Luigi, not law enforcement. So it has nothing to do with law enforcement use. Now moving down into the safety, you do see a lever style here. Now this was on a recall when they were being distributed by American Arms Corp. So what this is actually a design flaw. So if you have a Spas-12 that has this lever on it, even if the safety function's okay, eventually it will fail. It's just, again, it's a flaw in the design that all of these will suffer. So what essentially happens is if you put it on safe, chamber around, you know, do your thing, and then move it on to fire, it can discharge the weapon. And I have not obviously played with this one yet, but even if this one does not suffer that issue, eventually it will. You can today still buy trigger groups. You have to buy them on the used market. They're going to cost you maybe $200 to $300 with a push style safety, which is what the recall added, was a push style safety which solved the issue. Now, if you don't have that done and you don't intend to, the real easy thing to do is just never use the safety. Just always treat it as if it's loaded and don't use the safety lever at all, which you should do with a gun anyway, any firearm. So there's that one thing to keep in mind. But for your own peace of mind, if you do want to have that fixed, those parts can be found and they can be replaced. The pistol grip here on the shotgun is a polymer, overlaid polymer, and held in place by 2 screws. Now on the inside there is a little insert or a panel here. Typically on these, and it is the case on this one, you'll find cracks. Now I don't know what the constructive name of this polymer is. It's kind of like a rubber material. The buffer that they use in the back of the buttstock and the buffer that they use in the rear of the receiver were all made from the same material, and over time it all has deteriorated and is not very good quality. So when you purchase a Spas 12 gauge, it's really important to change out the buffer and the stock. If you have a folding stock variant, change out the buffer in the rear of the receiver. And there are 2 different buffer types. One is just a flat walled, and the other one has more of a cone shape to the end of it. I'll probably roll in a couple pictures. And you would need to, of course, disassemble to determine which one you need. I would go ahead and replace the buffer even if it looks okay, because eventually it will deteriorate. Here, this doesn't have to be replaced, but if this crumbles and falls out of the gun, which eventually it will just have a giant gap here, which won't feel very comfortable on your grip, especially with the recoil of a 12 gauge. So keep that in mind too. Now, one other safety feature you do have, and I'll flip this over, is you do have an automatic safety lever here, which does have to be engaged and disengaged every time you switch the fire mode. So even though the other safety I really wouldn't recommend using if it's a lever style, you do have this safety here as well. And when I get into the function, this is one of the main reasons a lot of people gripe about the Spas, saying it's overcomplicated. I have a couple dummy rounds. I'll load it up and show you how you switch between between automatic and pump, and kind of the processes you have to take to do that. Now over here, this is your bolt release or your bolt lock, and when it's in semi-automatic. Also, when you use the pump mode, when you pull the pump to the rear, if there is no more shells to load, it will lock. You will have to push this to release it to pump it forward. Also, this actuates your loading gate here, so you have to push that in to use the loading gate as well. This button here is a magazine disconnect, so it can, if you want to, say you have buckshot or defensive loads loaded in here, but then you want to fire one round, like a beanbag round or something like that, you can hold the magazine disconnect, then load your single round in, not allowing a rounded chamber from your magazine tube, and then fire the one round you've inserted. So that's what that is. Now up at the top, you do have a ghost ring rear aperture sight, which is very large. And then up at the front, you do have a post front sight as well. Of course, up here is the iconic stamped steel heat shield up here, and then your oversized pump, which is a polymer construction. Now down here at the bottom is a button, and that's the button you use to switch it between semi-automatic and pump mode. So if I want to switch it to pump mode, I push that button in and then push the handguard forward to lock, make sure that that locks in place. Now with that pump forward, it's disengaged and it's in semi-automatic mode. Now that I've switched the fire mode, I can come back here and hit this automatic safety lever out of the way, out of the trigger guard. Every time you switch to fire mode, or if you're empty, this thing will automatically flip back into safe, flip it forward to take it off safe. Then I can come back over here and actuate it in semi-automatic mode. Of course it's empty, so it's staying locked to the rear. Bolt release here pushes that to lock it, and then it's ready to go. Now when I pull the trigger, because it's empty, you saw that automatic safety flip back. Now, since that lever is there, if I want to switch it to pump mode, I can push this lever, bring that back, make sure it locks, it re-engages the pump. Now with the pump mode engaged, I can use it. Now it's locked, of course, because it's empty, so I have to push on that bolt release, and then I can close the pump. Fire. Do it again. Now it is a really heavy pump action because you are fighting that spring inside, that recoil spring. Now up here at the front, of course, this is the extended magazine tube, and then your 21.5-inch barrel. Now to load the shotgun, what you would do is you have to push again, as I mentioned, push on that loading gate. I have a couple snap caps here. Of course, these are not live rounds, but what you will do is push on that button, and you can push down on the loading gate and then insert your rounds, like so. Now, if you are in pump mode, you can, of course, pump. Sorry, I have to switch the safety. Yeah, I had to switch that safety lever. That's one, of course, there's another step you have to take. So, again, why people say it's complicated. But now that I push that, I can pump, and that would chamber around, fire, eject around, chamber around, fire. Of course, now that I'm empty, it's locked open. I have to push on that to close it. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick disassembly on this. Now, I've only done this once before, so if I fumble a little bit with this, don't give me a hard time. But what we will do is go ahead and push this in the the semi-automatic position, and then, of course, hit that safety lever, and then bring our bolt to the rear. And we're doing that to disengage the bolt from the barrel. Now we will come up to the front and thread off the magazine tube extension. Now this, the first time I did it, was really tight, so it might be kind of stuck on there depending on how long this has been sitting in someone's safe. So when I threaded it back on, I just kind of threaded it down and lightly hand tightened it because I knew I would be disassembling it again for this video. So I'm just going to go ahead and thread this off and pull it out. Now the modified versions with the full stock, usually that's where they cap off the magazine tube, so it can only accept a certain amount of shells, of course, and that's where they would cap that off and not have the magazine extension on there. Anyway, now that that has been done, we can very carefully bring the front end of the shotgun off the rear end. Set the front end aside because we do not need it for any of the further disassembly. So I'll bring this over. Now up here at the front, you are going to find an O-ring. Usually these also need to be replaced. Switch those out to make sure you have a very nice tight seal there on that O-ring. So I'll go ahead and pull that off and remove it. Now what I'm going to do is release my bolt very carefully and let it drop forward. And then what I'm going to do is very slightly bring the bolt to the rear. Now there is a notch here. Do this here. There is a notch here in the bolt, this little sliding piece that I need to align over the charging handle so that I can pull that out. And it's going to be a little bit stiff at times, and you kind of have to move this around and play with it and get that out. So that takes out the charging handle there, which will allow the bolt to then come out the front of the shotgun. It will come apart in a few different pieces. Here's of course your bolt and a little carrier piece here connected to the, I believe this is the gas piston. So we'll pull that off, and I do need to clean that. Then you have your recoil spring here, which I'll remove off the tube. Now in the back, I don't really think I need to do this, but there is a screw here. Just grab a large screwdriver, be very careful, unthread that, and then the stock section will come off the rear. And then there are two cross pins here in the receiver. You just punch those out with some pins and the trigger group comes off, and then that's fully field stripped. Well, that is all the time I have for you today on this. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking this out. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Again, this is Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports in Westfield, Indiana, and CheapGunsUSA.com. You are watching Marksman TV. We will see you next time.